Cline is an autonomous coding agent right in your IDE. To better understand what this really means, we need to understand what the word agent means. What is an agent? OpenAI defines an agent as a system that independently accomplishes tasks on your behalf. Anthropic defines it as systems where LLMs dynamically direct their own processes and tool usage, maintaining control over how they accomplish tasks. Although there are subtle differences from other providers, here is a consensus. An agent is made up of three building blocks: model, tools, and instructions. You might wonder, is ChatGPT an agent? Not quite. ChatGPT is a fine-tuned model meant to be used in a chat application. So if that's true, how is Cline an agent? Cline is an agent because it uses these three building blocks to generate code. So let's look at how Cline uses each of them, starting with the model. Google defines a model as a language model that will be utilized as a central decision maker. Cline supports a wide selection of models to choose from. In Cline's settings, you can choose providers like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google, and also specifically pick models like the Claude 4 Opus. And when you choose this, you are essentially assigning a brain for Cline to use. The next is tools. OpenAI defines tools as external functions that an agent can use to take actions. So think of it like a verb, like search, edit, and read. Cline offers tools just like these. In fact, here are some examples of tools that Cline uses. So with the brain that we just chose for the agent, it can now look at these tools and decide all by itself what tools to call. And when people say an agent is autonomous, this is what it's referring to. Cline is not hard-coded with sequence of tool calls to make like in traditional software. Rather, the agent freely decides what tool to use autonomously. The last building block of an agent is instruction. OpenAI defines instruction as explicit guidelines defining how the agent behaves. Cline has pages and pages of engineered instructions that sets how Cline ought to behave. It's also known as Cline's system prompt, as you can see here. Now that we understand what an agent is, let's do a dry run. When you send your prompt to Cline, Cline will start by expanding its existing system prompt with extra details about your workspace, your computer, as well as your custom instructions. So this large system prompt is sent to the model along with your entire conversation history. Once the model receives this request, the agentic orchestration starts to occur. Cline will autonomously start calling tools in what's called a recursion. What this means is that Cline will keep calling itself until it decides that it should stop. In other words, the model itself decides what to do and what tools to call, including when it thinks that it's done coding. So let's say your request was add a new button to the homepage. The model might take this request and decide to first call a tool called list files to see what files exist in your current codebase. And Cline will take that request and send the response back to the model. And once the model finds out what files exist in your codebase, it might once again call itself recursively for another tool. Perhaps this time a tool called read file to read the homepage.tsx file. The content of this file will be sent back to the model, and it might once again call another tool. And this time it might call a tool called write to file to start generating code to add the new button on the homepage as requested. After this change is made, and barring no error messages, Cline might finally call the attempt completion tool, which would terminate the whole recursion once for all. And this is how an agentic tool like Cline is able to fulfill your request to generate code. In most cases, Cline will do a lot more rounds of recursions than what was just illustrated, but the biggest takeaway is the nature of what makes Cline a coding agent. Autonomous agents like Cline is a powerful way to generate code by leveraging the newest and the greatest models that Cline actively supports and allowing these models to use Cline's custom tools under the guidance of specific system prompts that Cline uses.